This is a Wild Age Production podcast.
Welcome to the D&D world.
Meet you by the art room door, in a circle on the hallway floor. I made up a new map last night. It's got a dragon and a wizard fight.
So lately my kids have been watching this show on Netflix called The Hollow, which it has so much D&D influence in it. It's essentially video game influence, but you know it's hard to separate those two things. There's certainly video game. There's D&D influence in video games, and so it's just a length of whatever. It's 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, except it's 6 degrees of Dungeons and Dragons, right? It's how far removed is this from Dungeons and Dragons before you feel the influence on it. I remember reading a long time ago someone talking about the overreaching influence of Dungeons and Dragons, and it was based on the fact that some young person in their family was playing a Barbie video game that had experience points and levels and essentially feat trees. So it's just interesting to see how widespread the influence of something like D&D is.
Well, especially now, since D&D is the in thing that everyone's talking about in all the TV shows.
Yeah, I mean, even in the course of like The Big Bang Theory, right? The Big Bang Theory's very early episodes that mentioned D&D, it was like just some throwaway gag. It was just like, oh well, yeah, these guys are so nerdy they play D&D, and it would literally be like someone would mention Dungeons and Dragons, and there would be laugh track, like, we're gonna play Dungeons and Dragons. Ha ha ha! Isn't that ridiculous? And like now, there was like big giant advertisements. Tune in for the huge D&D episode that is going to be on Big Bang Theory. D&D is part of our advertisement because we know you'll watch because it says D&D on it. That's insane. Like just the course of that show, it's changed so much.
What, 20 years ago they had it in the X-Files when they had the 3 gunmen doing it when you thought they were playing poker, and it turned out they were playing Dungeons and Dragons. The guy took a $50 bet from everybody that he could roll a natural 20.
But the difference to me is the fact that they're like, now it's like, tune in for D&D. But this isn't I'm going to try to do the Crispy thing that Crispy always does. I don't usually do this part. So this is wait, hold on. How does he say it? Okay. So this isn't the D&D's overarching reach in other media podcast. It's the Save or Die podcast, a podcast about classic Dungeons and Dragons. Crispy is not here today, but I am Carl, and today I am a level 1 Rakasta that hates Mondays but loves lasagna.
And I am Courtney. I'm an over-enthusiastic level 1 fighter, and I'm ready to roll.
Hi, I'm Glenn from Welcome to Mystara. I'll be a level 1 immortal. Well, for the super stats from like the Wrath of the Immortals, page 76. What? It's a legitimate class. Fine, I'll be the cleric.
Well, yes, today we are being joined by Glenn Welch from Welcome to Mystara. Hi, Glenn. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, anytime. I'm glad to be here.
Glenn, the reason we reached out to you is because famously for the 8+ years this show has existed, none of the hosts, of the varied hosts that we have been really big Mystara buffs. You know, none of us have really had the history and played in that world and done that campaign. In fact, most of the people who have been on this show made our own campaign worlds. So what I would like to get out of this, and we're going to do a few of these where we reach out to people who really know the Mystara setting, is one for our listeners to get a really good feeling of kind of the innate setting of basic original Dungeons and Dragons. And for us as hosts to kind of learn more about it.
So to start us off, can you give us your quick elevator pitch of Mystara?
Sure thing. Mystara is all the D&D settings have one specific focus. Mystara's focus is on exploration and world building, where Ravenloft is gothic horror, Birthright would be high-level politics, and Spelljammer is D&D in space. Mystara has a lot of nations that are left unexplored. The inside of the nation is not civilized, so players can go into those nations and carve out their own domains. It does have a lot of the regular dungeon crawl and stuff like that, but this is the setting that gave us the Isle of Dread, where you go to a new land that nobody's ever set foot on, at least from where you are, and then you go out and explore it, and you make your own campaign out of that.
So would you say that Mystara is sort of a campaign setting that's designed for Dungeons and Dragons play as opposed for narrative cognitiveness?
It really depends on what part of Mystara you're using. The setting was created kind of in reverse from how they normally did it. So you have a lot of different settings that are mostly based on historical worlds. And if you want to play in, like, Thyatis, which is the Roman very obviously Roman nation, you can play, Caligula, I Claudius, Gladiator there. But if you go to, say, Ethengar, which is the Mongolian one, then you have a lot more room to play with whatever style you want. You can pick a different country, and they would all have a different play style.
So let's kind of do a quick overview of, I mean, I know there's quite a few of them, but what are the nations that make up Mystara?
See if I can do this in order.
Well, don't worry about that.
The first one.
Now you're showing off.
Now you're like me with Hobbit dwarves.
There's a little over a dozen, and the guys over at Mystara Reborn will laugh at me if I can't get them all, because, well, Mystara fans are a little bit in-depth with their knowledge. So, going through them as best I can, you have Karamikos, which is based heavily on Serbia, Slavs, Romania. Yalarum, which is the Arabic nation. Then you go to Glantry, which is like a fantasy Yugoslavia. That's the most famous one, because you've got 10 magical princes all crammed in one territory, and they hate each other. And that one has Germans, Dutch, Scotch, French, Spanish, Mongolians, good elves, fantasy humans, like the Borgia Italian. They're all crammed into one nation, and they're all these wizard princes, and they're doing research. And the only people they hate more than each other is everyone else. Then you have the Irendi, which are they're the Polynesian-based ones. You've got an elf kingdom, a dwarf kingdom, and a halfling nation. They call themselves the Hen. You've got 3 nations, which are obviously based on the Vikings. They're all thrown into one book. You have the Minrathad guilds, which is a fantasy nation, which is it's like all the races have their own guild, and they're this big merchant thing, and they're kind of cutthroat. And you have the Darrican, which is another kind of fantasy nation. Again, they're merchant-based. And then you have the Broken Lands, which is where all the bad orcs and goblins live. Ethengar is the Mongolian. You have Thyatis, which is a combination of ancient Rome and the Byzantines. Alphatia is it's another continent nearby, and it's kind of some blue skin or copper skin, depending on their breed. But they're there's a highly magical empire, and they're the rivals to Thyatis. Then you have the Etrugan, which was kind of a halfway written book about some people based on the American Indians, which the guy specifically said that they gave him an impossible deadline, so he just kind of rushed the book out, and it looks terrible. And then you've got the Shadow Elves, which is the Mystara replacement for the Drow, which are these underground elves that want to get out, but rather than being evil, they're really naive instead, because they don't know what they're getting into. And you've got the City of Serain, which is this flying gnomish city that goes overhead, which was added in a Creature Crucible. You've got a fairy kingdom that was sadly not very largely developed. You have a undersea kingdom, and these are all in the Creature Crucibles, which adds even more creatures to play. And that would be all the coronations.
I have a question. What is Mystara's connection to Blackmore?
Do you want the official, or do you want the behind the scenes?
I want behind the scenes for sure.
You even have to ask.
Okay, we'll start off with behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, Gary Gygax was fighting in TSR with all their famous internal politics, and he needed allies. And he went to Dave Arneson, who he had burned previously, and begged him to come back. And he says, if you come back, I will let you write your Blackmore. We will put it in Mystara's past, and you will have full control over your Blackmore. And Dave did come back, and he wrote 3 of the 5 books. And then he realized that Gary was about to get forced out, and he was going to go with it. So he quit after the 3rd book. They finished the 4th book, and the 5th book is kind of mythological. Now, how they tied it into the past is Blackmore was Mystara 3,000 years before present times, or probably more. I think it's about 3,000, though. And Blackmore was this kingdom that was under siege. It had enemies from every single side. And it reached out to this city that just appeared overnight, which was a crashed spaceship called the Beagle. And skip forward 1,000 years, Mystara and the Beagle, or Blackmore and the Beagle rather, have become this super high-tech society. And they're combining magic and super high-tech, and they never really show this. They only show the adventure from 1,000 years before. But Blackmore explodes, and that's where it sets Mystara into motion, because it rotates, or the explosion shifts the orbit of the planet, and then the lands defrost, and that's where you get the known world.
Okay, so it was sort of retrofitted.
Very much so.
Interesting. So I had kind of assumed that the reason there was a connection is because my understanding of BX is that it is a legal continuation of OD&D, essentially. But what kind of timeline is this? What year are we talking when they started retrofitting Mystara to, or the known world to Blackmore?
They put, well, let me think. Dave came on right in the middle of all of the Gazetteers, so that was 87, 89. And they put it, I think, 2,000 to 3,000 years before the current setting. It's 1,000 years after the founding of Thyatis, and Blackmore blew up 3,000 years before that.
For a long time, it's called just the known world. At what point does the name Mystara really start getting thrown around?
Okay, it was called the known world when they came out with Isle of Dread. That's where Mystara first appeared. And what happened is they were trying to get another setting, and somebody said, told, was it Aaron Alston, and says, hey, what about this setting you put out in Isle of Dread? And he goes, it's just fluff, it's background. He goes, we'll turn it into a setting. So they had to change it from the known world, which was known in all the modules before the Gazetteers, and then it started becoming Mystara as they started putting out the Gazetteers in 87.
Yeah, and we've reviewed a few of the Gazetteers, pretty early Gazetteers still, but they a lot of times they'll say the known world or the D&D world, but I've not seen them say Mystara yet. So I mean, and maybe it's on the packaging and not in the text, or maybe I've just missed it.
The Mystara world is not known for its continuity, including its production. It depended heavily on who was the one writing it.
We reached out to our listener base for any questions they may have about Mystara, and I wanted to read some of those questions for you to answer. And this first one is from Keith Parker. He wrote, if Mystara, and he says, I've never used it, has a type of mega underworld, Underdark, Blackreach, etc., I'd be interested in hearing about it. My understanding is it does not. Is that correct?
Sort of. It has it was introduced heavily in the Orcs of Thar, which was the 10th, and the Shadow Elves, which is the 13th. It's not like the Forgotten Realms Underdark. It has several names because, again, continuity problems. But the one I always stuck with was the World Below, and it's extremely hostile. It is not just this giant cavern network that you can walk from one side to the other. It's not continuous. You can walk into one cave and it's poison gas, everybody dies, caves collapse. It has several spots that's kind of magical or famous. You have the city of the stars, which is the shadow elf city that they attached to the ceiling using anti-gravity magic. And then you have Oinkmar, which is this orc city which floats on lava because D&D orcs were pigmen back then. That used to be an elf city called Angmar, and then the immortal that was trying to corrupt the shadow elves drove them off with poison gas because they weren't being corrupted fast enough. So yeah, it has a vast subterranean complex, but it's not stable, it's not safe, and very few things live there. If you wanted to look more into that, you would look at the Orcs of Thar, the Shadow Elves, or the Rockholm Gazetteers. They have the most information.
Gene Warren wrote, what I would like to see is a few recommendations for players new to the setting. What are some good starting locations and the pertinent source books for campaigns? What are some of the common hurdles players using systems other than BECME might face in converting, etc.?
The first thing you realize is everything's based on a real-life nation, so you have to figure out where they want to start. Most people start in Karamikos because that's the starter. That was Gazetteer 1. So if you were trying to convert it, the one thing a lot of people had a problem with when I converted this to 5th edition was not... Mystara is kind of like the Australia of D&D settings. It was created separate from Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms, so a lot of the races aren't there. There's no drow, and they've got 4 different lizardmen races, so Dragonborn are kind of redundant. Especially with 5th edition, with everything being thrown into the Forgotten Realms, Mystara doesn't have all the races. The half-elves are actually... in canon, half-elves are located in one specific spot far away from the known world because... Mystara doesn't have a lot of hybrids. If you're a hybrid race, you were created by an immortal. Humans and elves, if they have offspring, it's either a human kid or an elf kid. There's not a half-elf kid. In fact, the half-elves are their own race entirely that's completely different. And trying to keep with the setting, it's very high magic. 5th edition's a low magic setting, and Glantry... they've got a shopping mall full of magic items. Yeah. Good places to start. Darrican City is centrally located and is generally friendly. Thyatis City is Rome, but you can find a lot of adventure going in and out. Stay away from Glantry because, again, they're xenophobic racists, and they hate clerics and dwarves and halflings and everyone who's not them.
So what product would you suggest someone look into if they wanted to start running games in Mystara? Is there a specific product that they should purchase first?
That's the problem with Mystara, is they released all of the source books, and they never got a box set. They just said, hey, here's a comprehensive guide to this country, then a comprehensive guide to that country, then a comprehensive guide to that country. Probably just start with Karamikos, or read the back of each of the... read up on all the gazetteers to see which one would be the one that interests you the most, because they're all different, and there's no hub city like there is in other settings in Mystara. If I recommend, if everybody wants to be, Vikings, grab the Northern Reaches, but if nobody's interested in being a Mongolian, you don't need to pick up Ethengar.
Okay. Gene Warren also wrote, it's the only main D&D setting that was designed from the ground up with BX, BECME, races, class in mind. Does this help or hinder it now with the broader community, since not all basic retro clones retain race as class?
It depends. Like the halflings can be, clerics. Well, they say it was restricted by class, but Mystara really cheated towards the end because their skill system lets you cheat demi-human thieves in, and then you had dwarven clerics. The elves got their tree keepers, and they got clerical magic. The hen got a clerical class. So it wasn't as bad as the once the rule cyclopedia came out, because you got ways to sneak in alternate races. But yeah, there's a little bit of tweaking. For example, if you want to keep the elves being the one race that masters magic at all things, you want to keep the fighter wizard or the thief wizard classes restricted to the elves mainly. Oh, and because of their unique background, it's not wise if you want to keep with the setting to let the dwarves have any sort of arcane magic, because Mystara dwarves, at least the ones that are playable, are extremely resistant to magic because originally they were dying off from radiation from the Great Rain of Fire when Blackmoor exploded. So they reshaped the dwarves, made them incapable of using magic, but also made them highly resistant to magic.
Scott Jones asks what you think is the best way to deal with the fact that one of Mystara's best settings, Glantry, has banned 3 out of the 7 base character classes.
Yeah, like I said earlier, Glantry punishes all clerics with death because they don't let the immortals influence it, and they also dissect halflings and dwarves for scientific reasons. That's what makes Glantry so great, is because their politics are insane. Their internal policies are, homicidal, and you don't want to. When they changed up, when they switched Glantry to second edition, they got rid of most of the restrictions. It lost a lot of the bad guy charm. I mean, it's not really a bad guy nation. It's just so dysfunctional that it comes across that way. If you want to be a cleric or a dwarf or a halfling and you want to go into Glantry, you can do that. You're just taking your life in your own hands.
Okay, and Leonard, I'm going to say this name wrong, that's for sure. Leonard Pimentel? Leonard Pimentel wrote, if you were going to play in that world, what elements would you keep and what elements would you change, soften, or ignore? So this is an interesting question because, I run my own campaign world, which is very loose-knit, and kind of based off of what players I have in front of me at the time. So is there elements of Mystara that you don't like, that you change in your home games, and what are they?
Wrath of the Immortals, easily. It's the base breaker. Back when TSR was in the habit of nuking every single setting because they decided everything needed to have a change, they came out with a supplement. They just released all of the Gazetteers. They had just established the game world. And they came out with they advanced the game world 10 years forward with this module, or the box set, and then the module, The Immortals Fury. They nuke the Empire of Alphasia, sink it under the ocean. They have the half-elf or the Shadow Elves take over Alfheim and completely become isolationists and never interact with anyone. And they take out half of Glantry with a meteor. And it really sucked a lot of the tension out because Mystara was this massive Cold War between two great empires and everybody else stuck in the middle. And when they advanced it forward, they took out everything that people liked about it. So most of the people that I play with go back to the 1000 timeline rather than going to the 1010 timeline. As far as elements of what's in there, I try to because the modules were released one after another, and they didn't really that caused a lot of continuity errors because they didn't reference each other very much because they didn't know what the next guy was going to write. Pretty much every gazetteer was written by somebody else. They didn't have a lot of people working on the same book, they didn't have a lot of people working on more than one book. Introduce the fact that there's a lot of cross-culture or cross-border stuff going on. So it's not unusual for people to be playing, different races and different classes in another country. That was the one problem Mystara had, was it didn't connect a lot of the world together.
All right. Well, Ian McGarty, this is going to be our last question from the internet, but Ian McGarty wrote, could you squeeze in some wonderful Red Still into the conversation? He wants to hear more about Red Still. And that's honestly one of the products I remember the most just from seeing the advertisements of it. Like, I remember that red sword and it said Red Still. I remember the ads for that growing up. So I'm curious as well, because apparently people remember it fondly.
Red Steel was a region created by To Mystara during their dying days, and it was the second edition. It moved Mystara firmly into second edition. It was off to the side of the known world. There's actually 4 regions, and they were on the other side of the Serpent Peninsula, which is just an area with more countries. And what happened is there were 3 curses because people were being naughty all over the place. But the curses warped and merged. And so what you had was this red dust that was everywhere. And everybody that lived in the area with the red dust would warp and mutate. Unless you had this special mineral that I think was made from something that produced the dust. And if you kept that on, you didn't mutate. But you got special powers. It was a very weird setting, but people loved it. It was very Spanish and Portuguese feel, though they did have one nation that was obviously the Republic of Texas with the county of Cimarron. They added the Rakasta nation, and they had a Lupin nation, then you had a Druid nation, and you had a nation of heroes. And you had to, it was like high swashbuckling adventure for a lot of stuff because they had guns there. But the big thing was you had to always keep this Cinebril on you somewhere, or else really bad things would happen to your character. If you didn't keep it on you, you would keep mutating until you died. They really didn't do anything with it, is the problem. They released the main book. They released the Savage Baronies. Which was just a rehash of the main book, just focusing on the Spanish and Portuguese areas. And then they killed the line. They had 2 books that they had in print that they finished, but they never published. So they released them free online. I think you can get both of them at the Vaults of Pandios, which was the Orc's Head Peninsula, and then there was the creature catalog, or the monster manual for the Red Steel setting. But when I was trying to convert it to 5th edition, that was going to be its own book just because the amount of rules involved with the mutations was pretty expansive.
Well, Glid, that was the last of our questions for you. Would you tell us about your projects and what you are doing with Mystara and where people can reach you and what work you're doing online, both through your YouTube channel and through DriveThru concerning Mystara?
I do a Welcome to Mystara channel. It updates on YouTube, and I'm just talking about the history of Mystara and the products and what's good, what's bad. Actually, next week is my 100th episode. I'm going to be talking about why Mystara is the best setting, and everybody else can, just cry. Then after, I only got 2 products left that I haven't reviewed, and after that I'm freestyling it, talking about how to play in Mystara and how to fix all the continuity problems and make it a better setting. Now, what I've been doing this for 3 years because I originally just started doing it for my own benefit, then people started suggesting things, and then artists started asking me if they could draw for me to get the setting up for a modest fee, of course. So I started converting the Mystara into 5th edition, and I had to narrow it down to just the known world. There's 3 more regions of Mystara. The red steel setting, or the Savage Coast, which a lot of rules I didn't want to deal with, at least in the initial book. Then you had the Serpent Peninsula, which was 6 more nations, which they were kind of tied together, but their tie to the known world wasn't that strong, except for one of them. And then you had the Hollow World, which is its own setting itself, and that was a world inside of the Mystara world, where they took all these ancient civilizations and preserved them. And some people like it, other people have some problems, and it does have some issues. So I started writing the book, wrote down all the history, tried to, like I was saying I was doing earlier, trying to merge the nations together so they actually interact. I had to write down the races that just aren't there. And, I started talking in depth about, what roles all the the classes have with each other. And then I realized I can't take out races without putting races in. So I added the Dogmen, the Lupin, not Wolfmen, Dogmen, because they have a large presence in a lot of the Mystara products. The Rakasta, which date back to the Isle of Dread. Phanaton, again, Isle of Dread. Plus, some of my playtesters thought the idea of a flying squirrel monkey was just too cute not to play. I did the Turtles originally in Mystara before Wizards came out with them, and there's a few differences, but I like my version better, so I kept it in. And then the most difficult one was I liked the fairy race. I've always got a thing for folklore, especially with the Welsh Arthurian folklore. And I wanted to include the Sidhe, S-I-D-H-E. I have to spell that out because people don't understand they wonder what woman I'm talking about.
Who is she?
Yeah, the Sidhe are the Fae from Arthurian lore. And in Mystara, they included them in the wonderful Tall Tales of the Wee Folk. And this is actually the only race from the Crucibles that actually ever got mentioned again in any setting or any book from Mystara, because again, the writers never talk to each other. So we included the Sidhe, and they were an extremely powerful race with a crippling weakness to iron. So they made great wizards, but terrible fighters. And then we converted over all the races, the existing races that were there, because like there's 5 different versions of elves, but there's only one type of dwarf, there's only one type of halfling. The gnomes actually translated over pretty much sky gnomes into Serene, ground gnomes are rock gnomes, so gnomes didn't have a problem there. So we actually ended up with one more race than we took out. Then we started going to the subclasses. There's 32 subclasses that I added. I didn't add anything for monks because for whatever reason, the monks in the player's handbook tied up rather nicely with the monks in the Mystara setting. I even tried to include the classes I'm not too fond of, like the Warlock or the Barbarian. But I tried to put each nation has its own or a subclass that's tied to it. Some of the races or some of the nations share a subclass. Like you have the Merchant Prince, which is a wizard that works for the merchant guilds, and they have a lot of spells and skills devoted to increasing wealth or inspecting things or telling if somebody's lying to you. Stuff that makes you better in business. And that's something that's shared by the Minrathad guilds and Darrakan. But you have the Order of the Griffin, which is a famous order in Karamikos. You've got Roman centurions. Some of the stuff I stole straight out of history, put it in the nation, like the Scottish Gallowglass, or the Volva, the Wise Woman, which goes into the Northern Reaches. I converted all of the Glantry all the spells that I could find over, though most of the spells were in Glantry, because when they rewrote the Glantry book, Monty Cook, of all people, did the second edition Glantry book and took out all the politics, but added in a ton of magic. Then speaking of magic, we had... I put in the Secret Crafts of Glantry, which I had to put in as prestige classes, because they had prestige classes early in 5th edition. They didn't go over well. But the way the secret crafts are, which are in Glantry, they've discovered new magics that they're researching. And that's something that I had a problem with translating over, like the sorcerer classes. Mystara doesn't have wild magic. It's got very stable magic. In fact, it's so stable that it's like a science. So I had to drop the wild mage, but I've got to put in the Disciple of the Radiance. Glantry is over an artifact that's leaking magical radiation from Blackmoor. And that's one of their big secrets is Radiance. And people who learn how to use the Radiance can just overcharge their spells and do horrible things with it. But there's a chance that they will wither up and turn into a lich. It's not exactly healthy to play with magical radiation. I tried to convert everything I could find from the known world and put it into this book. All the alternate classes that were from Beckme are in the 5th edition book. All of the alternate magics, all the spells, they're in this book. I introduced all the heads of state, all the people that were wanted criminals. And then I stole some pages, or I stole not a page, but I stole a hint from the Aurora's Whole Realm catalog book, and I included shops, things that you could buy in or in Mystara, like foods, tools, things that you would find, just as a regular occurrence. And I also converted over a lot of the common magic items to showcase that these are things you can actually buy. There's 5th edition, for whatever reason, has this thing like you can't buy magic items, while over in Belcades and Glantry, they've got Crazy Carlos's used Golem Emporium. And some of the things in Mystara hasn't aged well. They had a few jokes for like the Arendi. They got a Fantasy Island reference, which if you're younger than 30, you've probably never heard of Fantasy Island. What I have to do now is I'm trying to get the attention. I'm trying to get this well known enough that people will talk about it and bring it to the eye of the powers that be over at Wizards, because I know they're busy. But they haven't written anything. There hasn't been a thing written since 1995 for Mystara. So the odds of Mystara actually getting an official appearance are slim to none. But if I've got the book written, and they're not going to do anything with it anyways, it's free money for them. The book is complete. I just tacked on the last page. The art is paid for. All the art is original. When I was first started doing this, yeah, when I first started, I got a friendly reminder from somebody that was associated with Wizards, nicely, but firmly explaining what was going to be allowed and what wasn't, because they thought I was going to just throw this out and try to make money off of the book, even though it was and this was years ago, though. This was me trying to put this together on Windows, or was it Microsoft Word, which was just for a nice idea, lousy execution. I got some page layout software, and I've been working on that. And some of the art is fantastic. In fact, the art for the Baron von Hendrix and Bargle, which are two of the big bad guys, that's kind of taken over what a lot of people show when they talk about those two. And I did want to have a lot of throwbacks. The first campaign I ever read, we had a girl by the name of Heather, who was trying her first D&D game. She didn't understand that you can make your own character. You don't have to pick one of the examples in the book. But she was dead set on playing Morgan Ironwolf. Right. So her first character was Morgan Ironwolf, and we had a lot of fun. I said, you know what? Everybody loves the original Morgan Ironwolf with the huge hair. So I put her on the cover, and actually I put her 2 more times in the book. Because it's something guys remember. Unfortunately, the official story is that they wrote the artists did a new version of Morgan because this is a new book and a new style, and we want to show her in a new light, a modern light. The unofficial reason is none of my artists could draw 80s hair.
Right.
So I've got a Twitter, it's Mystara9, and that's where I post up most of the things, and I talk about it, and I showcase the art. That's usually the best place to talk to me, though I'm new with this tweet thingy. Of course, you can always go to the Welcome to Mystara and contact me there. I really don't have a one place where I keep all this. I talk mainly on the Facebook at the Mystara Reborn with all the guys there, and they're the ones that, tell me what I did right, what I did wrong. One of them, Thorfinn Tate, donated all the maps that's in the book. He likes to take the maps and correct them. And killing continuity errors is something Mystara fanatics love to do. Though we all have our different ideas on how to fix each continuity error. But if I can publish this, and like I said, if the Wizard says, hey, this looks like a great book, please, show us what you got. And if anybody from Wizards is listening and wants to take a look at it first, be my guest. I will be more than happy to acquiesce. I'd love to, put the same amount of attention into the rest of the setting and further the book line. And expand on the fact that, some of the books didn't talk very much about what was actually in there. They would focus on one subject and then leave other areas undefined. And yeah, that was a large part of the focus on the setting. If the players are supposed to go into those areas and figure out what's there,
and ultimately set up a kingdom in those areas, I assume.
It depends on the nation. A lot of them, you will go carve out a thing, and then the leader of the nation will say, "Congratulations, you're now a knight or a baron. Here you go." If you go to the the module Test of the Warlords, you were carving out your own little pseudo kingdom as long as you paid the Empress of Alphasia her money. She left you alone. If you go to the areas in the Isle of Dread, that's the whole thing. Is what do you want? How do you want to play this game? This setting had so many sandbox modules. It was kind of hard to ignore that they wanted you to make this world your own. It was a lot different from the other settings, where this one, it has some high level NPCs, but you're not going to run into them unless you're actually hunting them out. Elminster's not going to show up in this setting and, steal your thunder, or you're not going to be playing escort missions to Dritz or Alias or Minsk. And Boo.
Well, Glenn, I think that's going to do it for us for today. And thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about Mystara with us. And we would welcome you back another time to talk more about Mystara once we get feedback on this episode, see if there's anything else people want to hear about and anything else that we can learn about the setting. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we close up the show?
Probably lots, but we can, one, my voice is going, and two, we want to leave people on a cliffhanger.
Well, thank you all for listening to Save or Die. I have been Carl, and I am side-eyeing that new Rakasta Nermal. I don't like the look of that new Rakasta. I think they're going to cause some trouble.
And I'm Courtney. I'm a level 5 fighter, and I'm on a roll.
I'm Glenn. Yes, I'm also that Mr. Welch. And I think I'm going to make my next character a puka.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, anytime. Let me know if you when you need me back.
Are you enjoying the show you're listening to right now? Great! Why not head over to patreon.com/WGP and support that show for as little as $1 a month. $1 a month goes a long way to helping support the network of Wild Games Productions. Again, that's patreon.com/WGP. Thank you.
Hilda and Leothward and Jan are passed out after a night of drinking in the common room of a tavern. Seated around them are 3 mercenaries waiting on them to awake. Leothward and Hilda wake up.
Now, I know I've won the drinking contest.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have a hangover?
That's a good question. You can be the decider of that. If you want your character to have a hangover, go for it. If not, fine. Doesn't matter either way. You could argue that your elfiness keeps you from having a hangover. You could argue that your elfiness makes your hangover worse. I don't care either way. However you want your elfiness to be.
I am gonna not have a hangover.
Hilda and Leothward wake up to the sight of 3 mercenaries seated around them, staring intently at the group of Hilda, Leothward, and Jan, who have been passed out on the floor. Jan is still passed out, but Leothward and Hilda, you see these 3 mercenaries. One of them is quite a bit older than the others, and the one of them does seem to have some sort of religious iconography on them, even though they still have the same symbols as the other mercenaries.
Like, what can you describe the symbol?
It is, it's the immortal, from Miss Mystara, the Mystara immortal that everyone knows, as, Ringo the Immortal.
That's as on brand as Raphael the Immortal, so yeah, I believe it.
Is there Raphael the Immortal?
There's a Raphael the Immortal. He's like the patron immortal of I think the elves, actually.
Okay, well, this is Ringo the Immortal. And the symbol is a star.
Of Mystara.
And his disciples, John, Paul, and George.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, so we're just on the floor of the
Yeah,
common
just
room?
in the common room, yeah.
Do we have like our gear on us, or is this like have our weapons been peace bound?
No.
What's the
There's
situation?
no peace binding here. You're just fine, and these gentlemen are armed as well.
Oh, but their weapons aren't drawn, right?
Nope, their weapons are not drawn. They are sitting there peacefully. You wake up and see them. You can respond, or you can wait for them to respond. And just let me know.
Are they looking at us?
Yes, quite intently.
I will say, oh, good. I would like eggs, sausages, and bacon, and your strongest tea.
The one who's a bit older smiles at you. And he says, "We're not the servers, Master Elf." I feel like I gotta give them each distinct voices, or it's gonna be a cluster.
You
Yeah.
You definitely should make one of them have a Liverpoolian accent. Well, if you're not the server, then who are you?
I'm Yorn. No, that's not gonna work. I know that's not gonna work. I can't have Yorin and Jan. That's gonna be a terrible, terrible audio. He's not Yorn. He says, "Oh, sorry, I had something in my throat. My actual name is." Promise I'm not going to do this with every person I name. My name is Cooper. I'm the leader of the Red Shields, and you just drank my new recruit under the table.
I hope stamina is not something that y'all look for in your recruits.
Well, we expect he's got quite a bit of stamina. He's drunk plenty of people under the tables before, and you drinking him under the table, that's pretty interesting. But the problem is we need him awake. We are leaving soon, and he is going with us. But
why is that our concern?
well, I imagine you want him awake as well. I assume he owes you money.
Does
He
I don't
actually owes
remember.
me a story.
What?
Yeah.
The younger one's kind of laughing at this, and even the cleric, who's been very stoic, cracks a smile. And Jan kind of rolls over at this point. Hello? How are you? How are you, Cooper? And Cooper just says, "You owe them a story?" And he goes, "Oh, yes, Master Elf, I owe you a story." A story you've never heard.
A story, excuse me, a story no one's ever heard? I was very specific about that.
How is that even possible?
You would make it up?
I am not a writer, but I can tell you a story. There is a tower, and we are, and like Cooper kind of tenses up, and like, is he actually about to do this? Kind of looks at him, and the other two kind of step forward, and Jan keeps going and says, "We are going to adventure there, and you could come with us."
Tell me more of this tower.
Cooper says, wait a second. Hold on. Jan, do you know these people? Yes, I know them very well. This is Master Elf and Hilda the Great.
Does this tower have treasure?
Yes, we think it does. And then Cooper at this point is like, Jan, shut up.
Does this tower have magics?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that Master Elf, that's why you want to hear about it. It is a wizard's tower.
And what would be the name of this wizard?
I believe his name was Xenopus.
Wait, you don't mean Xenopus, do you?
You've heard of him?
No, actually, I haven't. It was just a shot in the dark, really.
You made it.
My friend here's a linguist.
I speak many languages. It's part of my class features.
I I only speak in gold.
Cooper stares at the both of you intently.
So when are we leaving? Coop?
What do you think, Brother Bowen? He says. And Cleric kind of strokes his beard and looks at you over and says, well, their aid could be useful. An elf and a dwarf. We are going underground. They are going to be able to help us.
I do have a number of skills that could help us in a dungeon. Like, and I pull out my lyre and strum it.
Cooper smiles at this idea of you playing music, and he's like, I don't know, Master Elf, that playing music in the dungeon will help us, but we'll welcome it at the campground. If you want to come with us, you can.
All right, and then I grab my giant sword.
Secondary to the lyre, I also kill things. All right, he says, look, we got to go talk to the wizard first. Can you come with us?
Sure. Let's pay a visit to old Xenopus.
No, Xenopus is dead.
Oh, my condolences.
I didn't know him.
Oh. Well.
Then let's go see this other wizard.
So they stand up and let you get your bearings, and they hand you some like hardtack for breakfast. It's not very good, but it is edible, and they escort you within the town of Manubria to a fairly out-of-place building. There is a tower located in this town. What you would imagine a wizard's tower to look like, but it is in the middle of the town. On the way there, Cooper's explaining, and he says, Master Finian is who gave us the information to locate the dungeon beneath Xenopus's destroyed tower.
And the tower we're going to in the middle of town is Xenopus's tower?
No. Finian is a wizard, and Finian lives in this town. And Finian gave us the information to get us under the tower of Xenopus, who is also a wizard, but from long ago.
Does Finnegan have any healing potions I can carry with me? That he wants to help aid me on my travels?
I don't know that Finian has that kind of magic, but Brother Bowen does.
Oh, Brother Bowen.
At this point, the younger guy goes, hey guys, I'm Eric.
Oh, that's nice, Eric. Sure. And then I ignore Eric for the rest of the journey.
I've never met an elf before.
Uh-huh, yeah. No, we're around, you see us every once in a while.
I've never seen one.
Well, isn't it your lucky day?
I think so.
You should look in more trees.
I've read books.
Good for you. So anyways, Cooper.
Yeah.
So, what can you tell me about this Finian?
Well, he's a magic user and he's paying us gold. That is the extent of my knowledge, but all I need to know at the moment.
Well, you're just a regular fraternity of brothers, the three of you. You're just like some frat bros. Eric, Bowen, and Cooper. Big Coop, as we like to call you.
So, Bowen, Cooper, Eric, and Jan travel with you to meet Finian. And Finian is inside his tower. He comes and opens the door himself. He is an aged man. He looks older than any man you've ever seen. He looks old plus old times old. He's very old. And he says, hello? Who's with you?
Yes, young man. I hear that you have hired us to delve the tower of Xenopus.
More men. Cooper says, not more men. An elf and a dwarf.
Excuse me, Cooper. You're being very humanocentric.
Do you prefer to be called a man?
I am a man. I put my pantaloons on one leg at a time.
All right. Yes, more men.
And Hilda, in combat, is twice the man any of you would ever be.
I'm glad to hear that.
Well, now that we've gotten this all sorted out, what's our reward when we come back?
Oh, no, not when you come back. You must bring me the Book of Xenopus. Then I'll reward you. But if you don't bring me the Book of Xenopus, your only reward will be what you find in his dungeons.
Cooper says, yes, Finian wants the Book of Xenopus. I don't have any use for it. Neither does Eric, Jan, or Bowen. So we agreed to that. We're going to return the Book of Xenopus to him. He's given us the location of the dungeon, and we will keep any treasure that's in the dungeon of Xenopus as well.
Well, that sounds fine to me. You only want this one book.
Finian eyes you suspiciously, Leothward, and says,
What about you, Master Elf? You may want the book. Would you take it from me?
I mean, like, if you want to read this old man's diary, sure, but, like...
Don't play coy with me. Don't play coy with me. You have magic. I know you have magic.
Yes, I have magic.
Wait, why didn't you list that before Lyre?
Excuse me, there are far more subtler crafts than magic in the world.
Will you take this book from me?
Probably not.
Look, Finian, he's got like 1,000 more years to go, and you got like 10. I think we'll be fine.
I can wait.
I mean, I'm not taking the book from you.
No, I know that, dwarf.
Her name's Hilda.
Hilda the Great, says Jan.
I thought it was the old man. It's like, there's no way he's heard of her over me.
Finian says,
So are you ready to depart now?
and Cooper says, yes, I think we'll go now. We'll need that map. And Finian gives you guys a map, and you find yourself in front of a ruined tower with a doorway in the floor leading down. And that's where we'll stop. So join us next time as Leothward and Hilda the Great and this band of mercenaries that they have found themselves involved in plunder the depths of the dungeons of the Tower of Xenopus.
The Save or Die podcast is a production of Wild Games Production, and it's produced for entertainment purposes only. The music used in the intro and outro is by Tripod and used with permission. Be sure to visit the Save or Die crew at saveordie.info for more information. If you'd like to support this podcast, please go to patreon.com/WGP.